Well, welcome everyone again to this very important gathering. Uh, Many of you have been with us previous, someone yesterday, as we've been dealing with again what we believe is an urgent call to all those in the Chicagoland area and around the country, but especially those of the African American and other minority communities, as we're promoting again an opportunity to receive accurate and up to date information concerning something that's very important, and that is the Northwestern University's COVID-19 vaccine trial to prevent COVID-19 by joining a COVID-19 registry. Let me just say at the very beginning that this is one of several trials that's being conducted across the city and across the country. And on your website today, as you join us, you'll be given information about the one at Northwestern, which we're promoting along with others in the city and around the country. I have been blessed to be a part of Northwestern since 1978, when I was a young physician and a fellow in hematology oncology at the then Children's Memorial Hospital, that's now become the Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. But we are joined today by someone that's very important in our community and also in the community of medicine. Dr. Babafemi Tao is a professor of medicine at Northwestern. He is the head of the Division of Infectious Diseases there at Northwestern University, and he is heading again the NW Northwestern COVID prevention trials for the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, but also spearheading our push for those of us that will join in the prevention trials registry. Again, as we shared on yesterday, that there's been at least $3 to $4 billion that's been allocated by the American government, along with other institutions, to provide resources to not do any shortcut, but to push forward this push for an effective vaccine against COVID-19. Being a novel virus, it means that every human being on the planet certainly is vulnerable. And I've said this before, we're either going to get COVID-19 or we're going to get, along with the treatment, hopefully, or we're going to get a COVID-19 vaccine that's going to be effective. And again, Dr. Tao, a trusted friend of mine, has joined this fight and shared with us the need for African Americans to join in this registry. As we shared before, this registry was open about 10 days ago, and thousands have already signed up. In the very early stages of the sign up, less than 1% of those that signed up were minority, African American, or Hispanic in their ethnicity. One of the major goals of these studies is to make sure that those who are most vulnerable, those who have the highest risk of contracting COVID, will be a part of these initial studies. And as most of you know, African Americans are 3 to 5 times greater risk of contracting COVID, and certainly also being in that category of major complications or death. So with that in mind, I want to welcome Dr. Tao to the discussion. He's going to open it up to us, and then we're going to come back to you during the time of his sharing and my sharing. If you would join the chat box that you have either on this Zoom call or on our Facebook Live, our moderators and our technicians will field those questions and then present them to us so that hopefully we'll get in as many as we can tonight. So again, welcome, Dr. Tao, and it's open to you to share, and we thank you for your participation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bishop Smith, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time. I'm sure that no one on this Zoom call needs to be reminded that COVID uh, has been wreaking havoc over the last few months. We know that in the United States, several million people have been infected, and we know that we have lost about over 150,000 persons We also know that COVID epidemic or pandemic has been uneven in its impact, affecting disproportionately more African Americans than Caucasians as we know it. To be more specific, we know that more African Americans have been infected. And when you look at the severity of the illnesses, it's been worse amongst African Americans. And unfortunately, more African Americans have lost their lives as a result of this. So as I like to put it, the battle lines drawn by COVID-19 runs directly through the heart of the African American community. And so how are we going to respond to this? The vaccine studies that we will be conducting along with many other sites across the country is really an opportunity for our community to really fight back, to use that word, and really contribute to solving this major public health crisis. Just to give you an overview of how the studies have been going and where we are now, we are currently in phase 3 of the vaccine trials. The phase 1 studies have been conducted, and those were studies done primarily to look at safety in a small number of individuals. The second phase 2 trials have also been conducted. The most recent one was done at Oxford in the United Kingdom. It involved about 1,000 participants. Some of them were given the real vaccine, and the other were given a placebo. And placebo is just like water, essentially an inactive substance. The study did show, however, that those who received the actual vaccine were able to produce antibodies, that is, proteins that will be effective in fighting, preventing infection from COVID-19. The stage that we're now is a phase 3 trial in which we now need to do the same study in 30,000 individuals or volunteers for each of the vaccines. And there are multiple vaccines that have really scaled through the phases 1 and 2 and are now entering phase 3. The first one just entered phase 3, so the trials are just underway. The second one will start in the next few weeks, and that is the one that we will be participating in at Northwestern University. Knowing that the trials are imminent and knowing that we will really have a very short time to get the studies rolling, we have started a registry at Northwestern University. That registry will allow us to have a list of individuals, volunteers, who, when the studies actually open, we will be calling to seek their consent for participation. What that means is that enrolling in the registry now does not mean that you've gotten onto the vaccine trial itself, but it is a first step that allows us to know that you're interested in being contacted when the study opens in the next few weeks. To be successful, it's very clear that we must have adequate representation of African Americans in the registry and in the clinical trials themselves. And you might wonder, why is this important? It's important because if we end up conducting studies that do not have adequate representation, we will have no way of showing or knowing that whatever is found out to be the effective vaccine at the end of the day will work as well amongst African Americans. We cannot take that for granted. It's very important that when the results come out, the scientists involved should be able to say with confidence that this vaccine, in fact, works amongst African Americans and it's safe amongst African Americans. And the only way to get to that answer is by participating en masse in the clinical trial. We hope that we will have representation of not just African Americans, but also all groups that are at risk of infection or having severe complications from COVID-19. This includes persons who are over the age of 65, and the goal is to have at least 25% of the participants be over the age of 65. We also want persons who have pre-existing conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and so on and so forth. Because it's critical for us to show or know that the vaccine is also effective in this particular group. I'm sure there are many questions about the safety of vaccines. And I'm also sure that there are many historical concerns that have legitimately led to a reluctance in the African American community to engage in research, and particularly in research that involves vaccine administration. One of our goals tonight is to assure you and allay your concerns and answer your questions about some of these myths that you might have heard. And I think that in the question and answer session, I expect that some of these myths will come to the top and we'll be able to address them. One good news that I heard today was that persons who are HIV infected have actually launched a successful campaign to be included in the vaccine trials. Just to give you a framework of what that means. What it means is that when the studies were being conducted, scientists and others were concerned that, oh, maybe we shouldn't give this vaccine to persons who are living with HIV infection because maybe they have weaker immune system, maybe they might have a different reaction to it. But in fact, the opposite happened because it was the community of persons living with HIV that mounted a strong response saying, hey, don't leave us behind. We want to be sure that when the results come out, that whatever is found out to be effective must also be effective in our population. And for that reason, the tent has been widened and everyone, including persons infected with HIV, are now going to participate in the trial. So I say that just to emphasize the importance of making sure that we include all persons at risk. And I hope that in the question and answer session, we'll be able to allay your concerns, address the questions that you may have, and hopefully increase your interest in knowing more about the registry and then considering participating. I think I'll stop there. We can't hear you. Are you muted, Bishop? Bishop, you're muted.
Again? Okay, they just unmuted me. These are my technical people. I don't know, they may be asleep at the wheel. Yeah, so that was fascinating and that's really informative. It's also very striking. This morning, I got up about 7 o'clock this morning. I went to, again, my websites, and I went to the Wall Street Journal. The #1 article was just that, was the mistrust in minority communities to the national COVID-19 trials. And they also pointed out how critical it was for persons who are the most vulnerable to be able to talk to somebody they can trust so that they can be included. And I'm glad you pointed out, even with the HIV positive community, they're even saying, hey, we need to be included. And now they've been successfully included in these trials. And as you pointed out, these trials are in Chicago and literally across the United States. So I'm glad for all those who so far have joined us this afternoon. And there are others that are joining us as we proceed tonight. So I'm going to then open up to our technologists and our moderators for any questions that people may have. Again, you can put them in your chat box and they'll be incorporated in our discussion tonight. Don't be reluctant. Any question is valid, and we'd love to be able to answer that. So let me open up now to our moderator to give us any questions that the group may have.
So the first question tonight is, if you participate in the study, will they test you first to see if you have COVID-19?
All right.
That's a very insightful question. In fact, persons who are known to have had COVID-19, so if you've had a test before that showed you had COVID-19, those persons will not be eligible for the vaccine trial. So if we know you have COVID, you've had it for sure, confirmed cases. However, if you've not been tested before, and you don't know, even if you suspect you might have had COVID before, you are eligible to participate. And the reason is that, so you might wonder, why is it that we're going to allow persons who might have had COVID-19 into the trial? Well, the reason is we want to be able to look back and see how the vaccine does in that population, those who have had the infection. And so the only people who will not be eligible to participate in the vaccine are those who have had confirmed, laboratory confirmed COVID-19 before. Persons who have either not had it before, or even if they thought they had it, but it was never confirmed, we will allow them into the study. We will obtain their blood. At the end of the day, we'll know, we'll be able to tell whether they've been infected before or not, but it will not exclude them from participating in the trial.
Yeah, Dr. Tao, a follow-up, and I see it being added even now to the chat room is, so if you have not been confirmed to have had COVID-19, but you are tested and found to have antibodies, will you still be randomized on this trial, or will you just simply be followed to see how you respond?
That's, are you asking if somebody at entry is found to have the antibody, right?
Yes.
So at entry, we're not going to test for it. We're going to collect the blood, we won't test for it, so we wouldn't know, so that it wouldn't affect the way we're thinking. We would only ask you, have you ever had a laboratory confirmed diagnosis before? If your answer is no, then you come on the study. We obtain your blood sample, but we're not going to check to see, oh, do you have evidence of infection or not? We're just going to randomize everybody. We're going to let everybody go through the study the same way. At the end of it, we're now going to go back to actually see those who had COVID before, based on their blood test when they came in. And that's, again, another way of introducing rigor, because you can imagine that when we start vaccinating people, hopefully in the not distant future, routinely, once we have an effective vaccine, we're not going to be testing them for this antibody first before we give the vaccine. It's unlikely we're going to do that. So the studies have to be conducted as close as possible to what will happen in real life when the vaccines become available.
That's informative. Thank you. Another question?
Another question is if you don't test the antibodies, then that might be the drug that appears more infectious. Does that drug appear to be more infectious?
If you don't test, I think the question is, if you don't test up front and you randomize, could that affect a false outcome of being effective? I think Dr. Tao answered that. They're going to draw your blood at the beginning, but not exclude you based on antibodies. So even when the results come out, they will have had your blood tested, or at least a blood sample up front. They will know whether or not you had antibodies before, so it would not skew the outcome.
Right. One other important reason to do that is to be sure that this vaccine, we can actually give it to people who already have antibodies, because that inevitably will happen. And so we want to make sure this mirrors as closely as possible what would actually happen when people start going to their doctor's offices and the doctor says, yes, I'll give you COVID vaccine. We want to be sure that the results are very generalizable. I think that's the word.
Okay.
Another question comes in from mothers who may be pregnant or nursing. Are they excluded, or how would a vaccine like this possibly affect an unborn child during this trial?
So pregnant women, discussions are still going on about whether to allow pregnant women into the trial. I think that is something that that is on the table, but has not been finalized. But from all we know, there's no expectation that it will be harmful to babies. But you can imagine that all studies, virtually all study, well, not all, but most drugs, when they're being developed, initially do not include pregnant women. And subsequently, we add pregnant women to the pool.
So this next question, I think that is kind of addressed to both Dr. Tao, you and to Dr. Smith, that, and there's really concern in the African American community about previous generations of where testing has been done. And how do you speak to maybe those that are in our families who may have a concern about, loved ones being, taking this vaccine? How do we speak to, the mistrust, if you will, still as a result with the medical community?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that we struggle with all the time. I think first is that we have to acknowledge the reality of history. We've all read about Tuskegee. We know about the healthcare disparities that still persist today. We know about even the differences in the outcomes of COVID they're not unconnected with some of these disparities. But we have to look at it in the world of options. One option that we have is to really allow the past to weigh us down so much that we don't engage in this very important public health activity. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the result of that will be that we don't have a vaccine that we have confidence works amongst African Americans, which ultimately is going to be to our disadvantage. I think the only option that we really have in this situation is to walk into the field with our eyes fully open, to engage as much as we can, to ask the right questions and probe in the hope that we can actually get what we all describe as informed consent, which is the most important thing. We really have to get informed consent. Ask the questions. But the alternative of not participating has more negative consequences for us down the road than engaging with our eyes open.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question and answer. The truth is, even in the article I cited this morning from the Wall Street Journal, and Dr. Tao has kind of affirmed that we've got to, first of all, admit what has happened in the past was real. We cannot deny it, because when you're in denial, then there is no level of trust whatsoever. We have to admit that from the medical community, and this was administered again by the government-sponsored organizations in Tuskegee. I did a little research a few days ago. It happened it started really in the 1930s. Think about that. That's 90 years ago. And it went on for about 30 years that these people were not told what happened there, that they had syphilis, and that we had penicillin that could have been administered but was withheld from them. So there is a real history of distrust. However, as Dr. Tall has pointed out, with COVID-19, there is the truth. We all know it, at least in this part. There is no person on this planet who is immune from COVID-19 as we understand it. So the alternative or the options are two. Either you get COVID-19 or you stay enclosed in shelter indefinitely, or you get a treatment or a vaccine. So the choices are clear. And if we allow what has happened in the past to guide our decision, then we continue to repeat the past. It means that the most vulnerable populations, who we know are those that have been discriminated against before, will be almost shut out of a vaccine, and we will pay the price. I think all of us know this, that the numbers that they've been reporting, although sometimes very disheartening, they are real. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and others are dying at a much higher rate than others. That means that we are vulnerable. There is no denial about that. We have to do something. And just rejecting a vaccine is not doing something. And so to my friends who've said to me, "Oh, Bishop, I don't trust the vaccine." Well, you don't have to trust the vaccine, but then I ask them, so what will you trust? What will you do? How will you protect yourself and your family? So it is unfortunate of the historical background of mistrust. The truth is that persons like myself and others who have been involved in clinical trials, who've been involved in these national efforts, we, along with others, are keeping close watch on how they're being utilized. A fourth point is this, and Dr. Tao can back it up. In the first week when the phase 3 registry was opened, the great majority of persons who signed up, many of them were health professionals, doctors, nurses, people who know what's going on, and they enrolled in the registry. Why would they do that? Because they know that they have to be protected some way. So it's unfortunate what has happened in the past, but the truth of the matter is we need either a vaccine or great medicines that will treat us, or we're going to continue to have this devastation. So great question, but I don't really see a good alternative.
And let me just add a couple of things to that, which is also that right now, if you look at the Northwestern Registry, it is dominated by whites. And when the trials are conducted, there will be more whites getting the vaccine than African Americans. That's a given. It doesn't matter how we cut this apple. So it's going to be very different from the experience with Tuskegee and many of the other things where blacks were targeted. There is no targeting of African Americans here. African Americans will be part of the population that will conduct the studies. And I dare say that there will be fewer African Americans that will eventually get the vaccine in the studies than there will be whites. And the other thing is that one of the most important parts of research is data safety monitoring. In fact, there's a data safety monitoring board that is constituted way before the study starts. And it includes representation from a lot of people, including experts from the scientific perspectives, experts from the ethics standpoint, community members. Yes. And the community members are actually the lifeblood of data safety monitoring boards, and include representations of all communities participated. So you can rest assured that there are strong African Americans on the data safety monitoring board of this vaccine trial. One of the things that the data safety monitoring board does is to look at the results at very short intervals, and always with the question of, do we have information at this point to continue the trial? The trial will not go 1 day longer than it has to do. What do I mean by that? For example, if a few months after the study, we have evidence that the vaccine is actually quite effective and that evidence is crystal clear, that study stops at that point. Even if we said that we're going to do it for, let's say, 2 years, if we know within 6 months that the vaccine is actually very effective, based on what we're seeing, based on what the data safety monitoring board is seeing, the study is stopped. Patients will be unblinded, meaning we're going to look back and say, who got the vaccine, who didn't get the vaccine? And then you go back and make sure that those who didn't get the vaccine are actually given the right vaccine. So research has changed quite a lot since those days. But like I always insist, we still have to keep our eyes open, because it's only by asking these tough questions and holding scientists and government to a higher standard that we can really get complete safety in clinical trials. But the Bishop, Dr. Smith, has said it, that the alternative for us is actually worse than engagement with our eyes open.
Can you share a little bit, Doctor, about some of the results that you have received so far from the testing that has been done? And then also, too, can you share a little bit about are there any side effects?
So the study that's already in the public domain, it was published in a very prestigious journal about now maybe 3 weeks ago, involved about 1,000 participants in the United Kingdom. Some of them were given the real vaccine, and another group half of them did not get the real vaccine. They got placebo or water. And it was very clear that those persons who got the real vaccine produced antibodies, and these are proteins that can help prevent infection. They developed the antibodies, whereas those who got the placebo, nothing happened in them. And this was in the phase 2 study that I spoke about earlier on. They also did another thing. They gave the initial injection and repeated the injection after about 28 days. Those who received the second injection, which was only a handful of persons, not only did they develop the protective levels of the antibodies or proteins, they actually developed enough power in those proteins to be able to fight off and kill the virus. So there's a level of protection that is just to protect you from infection. There's another level of power that means you can actually neutralize or kill the virus. And it was shown that getting 2 doses of the vaccine was actually able to do that, which is why the clinical trial involves not one vaccine, but 2 vaccines. There's a vaccine given in the beginning, and then the vaccine is repeated on day 28. In terms of side effects, some of the participants who received the vaccine developed what you would describe as a symptom of a viral infection. So low-grade fever, body aches, things like that. None of them had a severe reaction. In research, we grade side effects by their severity, mild, moderate, or severe. And severe is actually, there's a low bar for severe. Severe will be anything that incapacitates you, anything that requires you to go to a hospital, anything that can affect you in a significant way. And there was nobody who had a severe reaction. All the reactions were essentially mild body aches, mild low-grade fever. They went away with taking medications like Tylenol. And after some time, they figured that actually, if you take the Tylenol before the vaccine, then you don't even experience those symptoms to start with, which is what people started to do in the context of the vaccine. And I think maybe we'll see some of that even here. There have been no reports of any organ damage. There have been no reports of any injury to liver, kidney, brain, lungs, anything like that. And so from all that we know now, it is considered safe. And that's why we have the confidence to advance it into these phase 3 clinical trials. And I say each, but in fact, there are at least 6 vaccines that have they're on the threshold of being tested in these phase 3 trials.
So to kind of follow to the next question, what are the follow-up procedures that happens, as this trial goes on? Can you walk us through just a very high level? What are the follow-up procedures?
So the vaccines, so the volunteer will be seen at the Northwestern, at our clinic downtown. We actually also will be seeing participants at the hospital in Lake Forest and at Central DuPage. We will see them the first time, administer the first dose of the vaccine. They come back, we give them the second dose in about a month. Over the course of 2 years, there are 6 scheduled times where they would come into contact with us. During those visits, we ask how they're doing, we check, we do some physical examination, we take some samples and keep monitoring. The monitoring itself involves a weekly contact with the research team. And we will do that based on the preference expressed by the volunteer. Some people would want us to send them a secure email. Some would want us to call them on their phone. Others might prefer a text. So whatever method the participant prefers, we will communicate with them. We'll also give the participant a log to record their temperature, record any symptoms that they have. And we have certain criteria called qualifying symptoms, which if a volunteer should develop those symptoms at any time during the course of the study, they're supposed to let us know, and we will bring them to the research site, examine, and make sure that we take tests and try to figure out what's going on. So overall, it's really a good, the strong follow-up will be taking place after the vaccination. The length of the study is 2 years, like I said. I wouldn't be surprised if things are cut short because we just know, hopefully nobody wants to wait 2 years before we find the results. You might have heard some people in government and in scientific community expressing optimism that we could have a result as early as the end of this year or early next year, sometime early next year, which is our hope and desire. But even if we have the result, we'll still follow people. Just maybe we'll see how we deal with it at that point.
Are there any concerns about mutation of this particular virus?
All viruses exist by mutating, but one of the main features of viruses and cells like that, organisms like that, is that they have certain parts that are conserved. What it means is that viruses, just like humans, are made up of billions and billions of proteins. But some of those proteins are conserved over eons so that even as the virus mutates, parts of it don't change that much. The proteins that are selected and targeted for vaccination are the parts of the virus that are conserved and don't mutate significantly, which is why we can say that even if mutation is occurring, which it will, it always does, that the protective proteins that are formed from vaccination will continue to be effective because they are directed against conserved portions of that virus. Hence, they're able to still provide immunity.
You mentioned about the expectation of having a quick result, or hopefully having a quick development of the virus vaccine. Is there any concern that should be on our part with regards to the safety in terms of how quick this is being developed and trying to be pushed out?
Yeah, that's a very legitimate question. But underneath that question is a second question, which is why or how is it possible that this is being done quicker? And we know that there are very clear steps that research goes through, like the different phases that it goes through, the different regulatory approvals, etc. The reason why this study is going quicker than anything ever in history, I would say, this vaccine study than anything ever in history, is because it's a public health emergency. Therefore, tremendous investments, financial, human, have been poured into it so that all the red tapes that normally delay approvals, they have been removed. For example, the phases 1 and 2 studies that I described to you, in the past, it might have taken 3 months or 4 months to just get the patients or the volunteers into the study. In this case, it took just a few weeks, a couple of weeks, because everybody wanted a solution, so people rushed to do it. The recruitment that we will be doing, we plan to enroll 30,000 individuals within 4 to 6 weeks. In normal times, you would never aim to do that. You aim to do that in 6 months. So we are able to do it in 4 to 6 weeks because the whole community of human beings, the whole of humanity is really involved in this. So what we could not do in terms of enroll in 4 to 6 weeks, we can do it now. Government has also removed very deliberately many of the red tapes, like I said. And so it's a combination of all of these things that has made the process faster. Nothing has been compromised in terms of the safety. So nothing has been compromised in terms of the number of tests performed before going to the next stage. There is no concern that because things are moving faster, we may come out with a product that we know less about it. That is not the case. We're just faster because we're doing things in a different way because it's a public health emergency that has received investments like nothing ever before, frankly.
So how long would a person be, once administered the vaccine and it's effective, how long would a person be protected against a virus of this type?
Nobody knows. That's $1 million question. And like the bishop said when we started, we haven't seen this virus before. People, even who are infected naturally, just by being in contact with other people, we don't know whether they are protected from getting the infection a second time, and we don't know how long that protection lasts. Right. Those are the kinds of questions that will be looked at in this study. One of the reasons why we will, for example, even if we found an answer and we decide to vaccinate everybody, we would ask people to stay on study so we can answer this sort of question. We would like to collect people's blood and see whether the level of the antibody declines over time or whether the level stays at a high level. We also know that even if the antibody levels disappear completely, there are other parts of the immune system that may already be activated such that they may be able to serve the goal of preventing infection in these patients.
So what are the cutoff dates for this registry for getting people registered?
We don't have a cutoff date. And one of the things that we've learned and we're going to be doing from this vaccine study is that we are actually going to be asking our participants to consider, there's a checkbox where they can answer yes or no to the question about their intention to be contacted for other studies that may not be related to COVID vaccine. But there is no end date. We'll keep it open. We really do want volunteers to raise their hands as early as possible. Because like I said earlier on, the clinical trials are about to start in the next few weeks. I'll tell you that we've had pretty robust response. In the last week, the registry is only just about a week old now, and we've had over 8,000 individuals enter their names into the registry. Unfortunately, when we looked again, it's extremely few African Americans. So we're really making the push to get African Americans involved so that we can be representative at Northwestern.
Well, this question is to Bishop Smith. Can you speak to any pastors or any leaders that's on the line now about how they can communicate to the congregations that they're involved with about, basically about this whole process and about getting involved, getting their congregations involved?
Yes, and in fact, as I shared on a call earlier and on yesterday, I have been in contact with about 20 of the largest congregations across denominations in the city. In the last week or so, I've recorded a 2.5-minute video at their request to talk about this to their congregation. So what they were willing to do last Sunday, and they'll do for the next few weeks, is to share that video and then come on and encourage their members to join the registry and to join, again, the phase 3 study. In addition, on our own website, any pastor or church leader can go to our website and request a call or information, and my staff, along with myself, will respond to them because we want to make it easy for people to do just that. And so, yeah, we try to make sure that I'm available, our staff that's educated in this is available, and any of our resources to really encourage them. We can't say it enough. We've got to get thousands of African Americans to register on this registry because we do not want this to go forward without proper and adequate minority participation. It is really important. You're helping yourself, but also helping others. So, yeah, any pastor, any leader that's on this call or that some that's not on the call, please call them, give them the AFC information, give them the Northwestern information, or again, go to the general information box about COVID-19 registry, phase 3 registry, and they will identify sites across the city. And we've done this nationally now. We just started the national campaign that any leader, again, you'll be connected with the people in your locale that's running these studies to make sure they can encourage you and your people to be a part of this effort.
Dr. Tao, similar question. How is this being marketed, if you will, to the Black community? And also, too, how do we get this word out to maybe the lower income community, part of the African American community?
Yeah, it's first, I think the questioner is absolutely right that we have to get not just African Americans, but we want to reach lower income, middle income, just everybody to be involved. And the same is true for other ethnic groups. How are we doing it? We're depending on grassroots communication, which is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to engage the churches. We're trying to engage community leaders. We're trying to engage peers. If you're convinced, talk to another person. We want it to be a dinner table conversation. I think it's actually an opportunity to bring the African American community back into their rightful position in the research community. We need to step inside. We need to stop looking from outside and actually step inside, because that's really where we want to be. We have to be at the table. It's just like any negotiation. If you're not at the table when the decisions are being made, you lose out. So it's critical that we actually join this, and it's one person at a time. We hope that the people who are on this call, if they are so inclined and they are committed and interested in this, should help spread the word. And I think by so doing, we can ignite the whole thing across our community.
So
Dr.
one,
Todd, you indicated that there's been a response to Northwestern. We're going to continue to push that. Do you have any latest data about the other efforts in the city? Are they receiving a good response, or is that pretty similar at Cook County and Rush and so forth?
I don't know the exact numbers at those places, but I'll tell you that we have a national community. And when we talk about this, it was about 5% at the other sides too of African Americans participating in their entire population.
Right.
I think one can expect that some of our other clinics historically have had more African American engagement and more African American patronage. And I would expect that to also show in the number of African Americans seen there. But there's no doubt that this is a general concern and general fact that when you look at the numbers, not just for COVID research, but particularly for COVID vaccine research, no matter where you look at it, African Americans have a very, very low, disproportionately low numbers.
Yeah, I see another question about have we reached out to aldermen and other officials? I can guarantee you that both city officials, state, county, and federal officials, all the Black caucuses have been contacted. And we are urging them to use their efforts and their um, visibility and their people to get this word out. And again, we have not said only to the religious people, but I know that population. We have urged people of every civic and economic background, leadership, to please urge with their level of notability and their leverage to get persons, again, from every ethnicity, every economic group to sign up. We want everybody that can to please do that. Someone said, should they consult their personal physician? I urge my friends that when you contact a source, you can use your own personal physician to go on that site with you, and they can, again, walk you through because you know them. But at any means possible, we need to get as many people as we can, especially of our community, to sign up because it's really, really important.
some other, I guess, some other recommendations is, other platforms of social media, such as Snapchat and TikTok, could be some other avenues by which you can get the word out.
Yes, and we're exploring some of those. Very correct. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to encourage people that if you didn't have your question answered, we will compile all the questions and make sure that they are then given to Dr. Tao, myself, and others in another venue to answer them, because we need to make sure that these questions are answered. I see one about food allergies. I'm not sure. Do you know if the vaccine will contain any of the common food allergens? But again, we want to be able to answer any question. Maybe the one on Dr. Tao, you may just want to give us a short answer about the issue of common food allergen.
There is no relationship concern that any food allergy will translate into allergy to the vaccine. I think maybe the questioner is thinking about egg allergy and the flu vaccine. We don't have any such concern with the vaccines that are being studied for now.
Well, again, we've got a few more minutes. We're going to not go past the 5 o'clock hour. I see a question about how many times has it been found that Blacks actually react differently? Is found very commonly. I had a physician from Johns Hopkins on a call with me earlier today that pointed out the data about high blood pressure. There are agents that have been developed for high blood pressure that certain categories don't work well in African Americans, and then there are others that work very well. And a couple of those that most of you know the names of these drugs is because African Americans were a part of their development. We should not minimize every person's contribution, and especially with COVID, we know, we know clearly and in very unfortunate numbers that we are affected by COVID. It is critical that we be included in the development of. Wouldn't it be strange if we have a higher risk of getting COVID, but lower numbers anticipated with a cure? Something's wrong with that equation. We should be the ones that are included. I said this to a caller this earlier today. If the risk to African Americans is 5 times greater, then the resources both of testing and of development, those resources should be directed to that population. That's the scientific principle that you must make sure that with good ethics, that your focus of research is to those who are most vulnerable. It would make no sense for those most vulnerable not to be included in a remedy. So again, I know people have their fears, but I'm going to say this again. Fear will not protect you. Fear will not help you. Fear will keep you where you are. So I'm urging all of those that are part of the concern in general to encourage your friends and your associates to at least put their name on the registry. It's a small step but an important step to make sure that you get contacted as they open up these trials.
And again, I just trying to understand why is it that the persons living with HIV fought, because that's the word, fought to be included in this. And the email was actually sent by the NIH just this morning with balloons and flowers popping out from the community of persons living with HIV that yes, now we are included. I can assume that it's because over the last 30 years, persons living with HIV have actually seen the power of science, because through research, HIV infection has been changed from something that killed virtually everybody who got it
Right.
to a chronic disease that in some ways is less dangerous than uncontrolled diabetes. And so people with HIV know that the way to help yourself the most is by being part of efforts to find treatments, efforts to find a vaccine. And I hope that that resonates with us, that the way to really become part of the solution and almost in a selfish way help ourselves is to be part of the trials that would lead to treatments and vaccines.
Dr. Tao, can you give our listening audience a website that they can go to if they want to get more kind of the more technical and more data? Can you give us that information of where they can go and find where they can find that at?
Let me give you the name of the vaccine that we'll start with. Is AZD. A as in apple, Z as in zebra, D as in David, 1222. That is the name of the vaccine, AZD 1222. So if you Google AZD 1222 NIH trial, it will come up and you will have a variety of other sites, of course, but you should be able to sift through them and get some information. AZD 1222 vaccine is a vaccine that we'll be starting with in the next few weeks. And you can get that. We can also look for some other sources that maybe we'll send, can look for it and make it available to the bishop, and then maybe we can disseminate it to people. But I think it's good to have some references. That's a good question. We can work on that.
Well, that's a good way to end it. Yeah, if again, we will forward to our website all those suggestions and as well as other sources. We encourage people to use other sources so you can confirm what we're telling you. but try to do it as quickly as you can, because again, this is an urgent matter. Some things are time sensitive that we want to make sure that our community is not left out. I want to thank Dr. Tao again. He has made himself available over and over again and continues to be. And again, don't be afraid to use the other websites. Don't be afraid to question others to affirm what we've told you. But once you get the information, you got to make that critical choice of what to do about it. Somebody said years ago, when you know better, you should do better. So getting the information is critical, but the next step is making a decision. I want to thank all those from our staff and the participants on this call and others who have been so diligent. And again, we will keep our sites open with a special reference point to COVID-19 registry to make sure that people can have those other resources and utilize them. And we'll be coming back to you again with information more about it as we move forward in this effort.
Thank you.
We're going to close with that. To those who are members of our church, I'll be coming back at 7 o'clock, as you know, the stream, the spiritual part of COVID-19 vaccine, along with the scientific. You can go to our website if you're not a member and join us tonight at 7 with the stream, and then at 7:30 with our Zoom call. So again, thank all of you for your help, and especially our staff. Appreciate you to the highest.
Thank you. Bye.